No, not yet. That was the practice run. You got to warm them up a little bit. Okay, so for those that don't know me, I'm William Bird, and I run MMA. Thank you for being with us this evening.
Recording in progress.
There we go. Recording is in progress. So we're here this evening to discuss a very difficult and nuanced and horrible issue, which is hate speech. So naturally, what we choose to do with horrible things at MMA is make fun of them. And so what we're doing this evening is going to attempt to unpack and look at the nuances of something detestable and horrible, which is hate speech, in the format of a game show. The issues that we're dealing with are often hot-button issues. They're taken from live examples that are either on social media or have been on social media in recent history. In one or two cases, we haven't named the people. In one of them, we have. But in essence, it's about making sure that we can unpack and understand nuance. In no way, shape, or form are we attempting to belittle or undermine the seriousness of these issues that we're dealing with. People that are obviously may be upset by some of the things that get said, but please understand this is in an effort to help us understand hate speech and its limits. We're joined by an amazing group of people. You'll see we had to rush around because I forgot to add all the chairs, of a game show host and a judge who's one of our finest advocates in the country, who's going to run through the program and unpack all the difficult and complex issues. But again, it is aimed at being a bit more light on something that isn't very light at all. So if you're easily offended, you should leave now. And if you like Andrew Tate, you should leave now. Wow, that went down like a bloody lead balloon. See, even they laughed at that joke, and they've heard it twice. Okay, so with that, we're now going to move on. So get ready for your rapturous applause. So joining us all the way from Melrose, Johannesburg, the fabulous, the funny, the scintillating Kgotatso Mampa. That was better.
Thank you, William. Can everybody hear me? Well, this is a lively crowd. Usually at this time of the day, when people walk into a room, it actually feels like I've accidentally walked into the waiting room of a men's health clinic. Well, I haven't been there. I haven't been there at all, William. I'm sorry to disappoint you. My name is Kgotatso Mampa. I am a media and IT lawyer based in Johannesburg, but today, for all my sins, I'll be the host of Rate the Hate, and that's the game show. Yay! When I was growing up, there were about 2 game shows on TV. Actually, maybe more. There was Noord for Noord. Does anybody know that one? Is it still on? Oh, hectic. And then there was... Then there was the Zama Zama game show. Anybody remember that? Zama 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 game show. Yeah. And then there was Jam Alley. I mean, there were lots of those. So maybe let's try and revive that spirit, because I don't see game shows anymore on television. But I don't watch much TV. Don't have time. Anyway. Yes. William's got the comedian tonight. So I'm your host, but I'm not alone. Of course, I would like our team members, or the 2 teams, to please join me on stage, and the judge, and then I'll do introductions, and then we can get cracking. Please give them a warm round of applause. Is everybody good? Hello? Is everybody alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic? William's already tipsy. Okay, wonderful. Now the stage looks absolutely complete. So what I was meant to do was actually introduce everybody on stage, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give them at least a minute and a half to introduce themselves. I'll start over there with Sandy.
Hi, I'm Sandy McCowan. I flew all the way from Gqeberha to join you guys tonight. I work at a small TV station called Mpuma Kappa TV. It's the Eastern Cape TV station. We're on DSTV channel 260, and I'm head of news and current affairs for that channel. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Over to Slee.
Thank you so much, Khotatso. Evening, everyone. My name is Slindile Khumalo. I'm an attorney at a law firm called Power & Associates, which deals broadly with constitutional matters, and we often have hate speech cases at our desks that we have to grapple through. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the discussion and the debate this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Slee. Asra.
Hi, I'm Asra Bramdo. I am digital news editor at the SABC, way long distance away in Auckland Park. So yeah, we deal with a fair amount of constitutional issue matters. But very often we're also, I think, the subject of it. So it should be an interesting experience.
Thank you, Asra. And over to, I think, the only person who's actually an expert on hate speech in the room, our beloved judge, Ben Wiggs.
Yeah, because we all need a straight white man to tell us what hate speech is. Yeah, my name's Ben Winks. I'm an advocate in Johannesburg. I specialize in media law and done a lot of hate speech cases, the Old Flag case, the Kwelane case, and those kinds of cases. And it's my third time being asked to judge Rate the Hate, so hopefully making myself welcome and not getting things too wrong. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Ben.
Good evening. My name is Komoto Mudise. I'm a reporter from Eyewitness News. It's good to be back. I specialize in crime in the courts. In fact, I actually just remembered that I covered one of the famous hate speech cases, Vicky Momberg. So yeah, it's good to be here, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, Komoto.
Hi, thank you. My name is Nozintombi Mia. I am an assignments editor at the SABC in Gauteng. Just like Azra, we at the SABC are probably more subject to hate speech more than most of the broadcasters. So thank you for having me here. We're excited to get this game show going and talk about what is hate speech.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Claire de Haas. I work together with Slee at Power & Associates, and I think that she has summed us up perfectly, so I don't need to say anything else.
Oh, I see. Well, thank you. Thanks, everybody. So the idea of the game is we've got 4 scenarios, okay? 4. Can everybody hear me? Everybody looks so lost. So we've got 4 scenarios. These are real-life scenarios. And the idea is just to demonstrate how tricky and how difficult hate speech cases are. I know, social discourse has gotten so loud. You know, people can be very flippant to say, well, but that's hate speech, but that's not hate speech. But if you read some of the judgments, I read one judgment, I think it was a Kwelane or Masuku judgment. I was like, all these words, just to say that this is hate speech, but it's important. And so the idea is we're going to give our 2 teams the 4 scenarios. We'll give them 2 scenarios, and they'll leave us, and they'll go deliberate. They'll come back, and then they'll rate the hate, literally. And then you also get to judge them as well, in terms of how well you understood what they were saying. And then our judge, Ben Winks, will decide on the winner. And the winner is determined by who's the most legally correct and who's most understandable. And I don't know what other criteria Ben will use. Like, I don't know, do I like you? I'm kidding. Yes, Asra.
He did say bribery was
right. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So does everybody understand how the game works? So please, you're all part of the game. And we've decided to do a game show style as opposed to a panel discussion because those get really boring. I mean, you will agree. And hate speech is so difficult that we don't want to lose people. We really want people to understand, particularly now when social discourse is getting so loud and confusing. You need clarity. We have to go back to basic principles. So our teams do have names. I mean, the names sound like bacterial infections. So I decided I'm not going to repeat them. Claire, what's your team's name?
I'll do the honors for you. MC. Ours is taken from the original word is annihilators, but we are going to call ourselves the Annihilators.
Annihilators. Woo!
You can clap for that. Thank you.
Okay, Slee and Sandy, your team?
So we...
Yeah.
So we decided to be the haterators.
Haterators and annihilators. Okay, cool. So, but before we give them the first two scenarios and they disappear like an absent father on payday, what we're going to discuss... I just want Ben to quickly tell us really... there's a commotion from the SABC. So I just want Ben to really quickly contextualize hate speech, because I don't think everybody understands what hate speech is and what it means. Ben, everybody talks about how we've got this wonderful constitution that talks about freedom of expression, but we seem to have a necessary or maybe a reasonable and justifiable limitation to that freedom. Can you maybe just contextualize hate speech?
Yeah, thanks very much, Khotatso. The understanding of speech. Yeah, that's much better.
Yeah.
Thanks. The concept of speech as something that is free and should be flowing unhindered is a somewhat limited one. We often find people defending their having said something or published something or drawn something or painted something that causes injury or offense, saying, but I have a right to free speech. But every society for centuries has imposed limits on speech. You can't defame people. You can't use other people's brands or intellectual property. You can't infringe people's privacy by publishing their private photographs or whatever. So limits on speech are nothing new. But in South Africa, for example, it's really post the Second World War, that the idea of limiting speech that injures people's dignity and equality, so we're not talking about reputations and privacy and those kinds of interests, but actually injuring people's dignity and equality on the basis of who they are, their immutable characteristics. That then is something that the law draws a line at, post the Second World War. And the South African Constitution recognized that and said that everybody has a right to freedom of expression, which includes the right to the free flow of information and ideas. But that right does not extend to three things: propaganda for war, incitement of imminent violence, and the propagation, or rather the advocacy of hatred based on race, religion, gender, or ethnicity that constitutes incitement to cause harm. So that sets a boundary for free speech. But Parliament has gone further and can go further. Just like the Constitution doesn't carve out defamation, our law does, and says you can't defame people unlawfully. So Parliament has passed a law, the Equality Act, which says that speech even beyond that, or even less severe or extreme than the ones carved out in the Constitution, can be prohibited. And I'll just give the teams a short explanation of what that prohibition on hate speech involves, and then I think we can get rolling.
Cool.
So the prohibition on hate speech in the Equality Act, I'm not talking about the criminal law that's been passed recently, the Hate Crimes and Hate Speech Act, but the Equality Act, which was passed in the year 2000, says that nobody, or that it will be hate speech. It's not a crime, it's a human rights violation, which is dealt with differently. But anybody who communicates or propagates or advocates words, which also applies to images and songs or anything like that, that could reasonably be construed to demonstrate an intention to be harmful or to incite harm, and to promote or propagate hatred on the basis of prohibited grounds, commits hate speech. And prohibited grounds is anybody's immutable characteristics: race, sex, gender, religion, sexual orientation, HIV status. Strangely, nationality is not one of them. That's something the legislature really should address. But disability is another important one. So typically any kind of protected group characteristic would fall under the prohibited grounds of speech that can reasonably be construed to demonstrate these meanings or these intentions to be harmful or incite harm, and to promote or propagate hatred. So that's the framework you'll be looking at for judging these scenarios.
Cool. Did everybody get that? Thank you, Ben, for beautifully summarizing what is otherwise very, very complicated. But all right, we're going to work through this. So, are the teams ready? By the way, our teams have not heard of the scenarios apart from their legal experts. So this is the first time they get in the scenarios. I'm going to give them 2 scenarios. Then they're going to excuse themselves, or they're going to excuse us so we can talk some more about hate speech. And then when they come back, we will rate the hate. Got it? Cool. I just see blank faces. Uyanda, what are you thinking about? Okay, cool. Here goes scenario 1. It's called Flags, Emojis, and White Power. Now, DP, I don't know where he's from. He's probably from Reicha Park, I don't know. Now, DP sends a message on his neighborhood WhatsApp group, which has about 250 members, with a picture of the old South African flag from a history book. And the caption is, "Let's bring it back," followed by hashtag WP, an emoji of a white heart, and an emoji of a skull and bones. Would it be different if DP sent it to the WhatsApp group with his 4 cousins? So that's scenario 1. Got it? Would you like me to repeat it? Or they'll get it. Okay, cool. So that's scenario 1. They must tell us. We're dealing with an old South African flag, which has been published to a WhatsApp group that has about 250 members, and we must now rate the hate, i.e. determine whether that constitutes hate speech or not. That's scenario 1. Scenario 2, attacks on the marginalized. Now, I'm quoting Andrew Tate. "The easiest way to deal with this new group of little bitch boys, Democrats, is to simply call them faggots. They'll call you homophobic and bring out a list of talking points they heard at a gay bar, at which point you simply double down and call them faggots again." That's scenario 2. Andrew Tate. Everybody good? Cool. Can the teams please excuse us? Would like to talk more about hate speech. Guys, please give them a round of applause. Like, encourage them. Gosh, I gotta keep time. Oh, thanks, babe. How much time do you give them again? 15. Teams, please be back in 15 minutes' time. Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so I'll just take their cue when they walk in, because I can't multitask, like, really. Much like DIY. I mean, to me, it stands for don't involve yourself. So I'd rather just pay. Okay, so I'm going to chat to Ben, and please, if you do have questions, feel free to chime in. We'll get a mic. Paul's already got a hand up. Oh, geez, we haven't even started, Paul. Like, come on. Or should we start with Paul, and then we'll get cracking? No, we'll get you a mic.
It flows from
Switch it on, Paul. On, O-N, on.
Hi. Okay, great. It flows from your comments on the extent to which the legislature expanded the definition of hate speech. Now, the Constitution is pretty clear in using limited grounds that are truly immutable. All of the discourse, that we've had around prohibited grounds in the Equality Act does use this nomenclature about immutable. But immutable traits, as a concept, in my view, is pretty fuzzy. Your religion is something people can and do change. I concur that the absence of nationality as a prohibited ground is a major problem. But nationality is an example of something that just fundamentally to characterize as immutable, is problematic. And I'm just sort of wondering whether the language of immutable trait, when we move past the Constitution, narrow parameters. In other words, when we, as with the Equality Act, would consider a broader Section 36, balancing act, in terms of constitutional limitation, whether we shouldn't move away from the idea of this is a problem to throw this at a person because it somehow relates to an immutable trait, and rather ask the question of whether it's tied to the core of a human being's dignity. It just strikes me that there's a gap between the parliamentary standard, which has continued with this language of immutable traits. If you look at the portfolio committees, meetings and that sort of thing, versus what the jurisprudence of the Constitutional Court has been, concerning dignity and that sort of thing. Or am I just being a lunatic? Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. Ben?
Lunatics are also protected under the Constitution. No, it's a very interesting question. I appreciate you pointing out the word immutable is not a good one in the context. I prefer generally to refer to protected group identities or protected group characteristics, which is used in some legislation. Because it's a normative question. Society will dictate what's protected and what's not, and Parliament is one of the vehicles through which we decide that. So we have various group characteristics that are set out in the Equality Act, and as you say, nationality is not one of them, but importantly, sexual orientation and disability are. So while the constitutional conception of extreme hate speech is limited to race, gender, ethnicity, and religion, because it comes from a post-World War II language of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The world has changed, and there's recognition that discrimination on the grounds of disability and hate speech on the grounds of disability against people with albinism and dwarfism and the like is no less a violation of dignity and equality than racism. So in a sense, it's quite arbitrary, and some of those grounds are very difficult to interpret. So one of them, for example, is belief. Which is very difficult to apply in an equality context. I don't want to take too much time on one topic, but it's something we can circle back to if there's time later. But there's a very interesting debate about belief in particular.
Okay. Right, awesome. Thanks, Paul. I do think it's a higher grade question, and I really just wanted to keep it's simple, straight and simple, basic principle, because, we don't want to lose people. The idea is to entrench hate speech as a concept in the minds of the audience today. So maybe
perhaps to do exactly that, perhaps I can sort of try and simplify. Well, the last thing that Paul said, I think, is very insightful, which is that, it's really about the core of what makes a person human, or their human dignity.
Right.
And that's the thing that's different about hate speech. So some people say, and some societies say, that it's fine, you have a defamation action, or you have an insult action if someone injures your common law dignity, hurts your feelings, then you can take them to court for that. But what makes hate speech different is that it strikes not only at individual dignity, but group dignity. So in some places in the world, they call it a group libel or group defamation. I don't prefer that terminology. But it strikes at because that speech is employed in whatever context, it strikes not only at the dignity of the particular target. Sometimes there's no particular target, but strikes at the dignity of an entire group. And the same is true for hate crimes, where people are killed for being gay or having albinism. That strikes fear and indignity into an entire community. So that's what makes it different and why countries decide to legislate against it, separately from harming people's reputations and dignity.
And thanks, Ben. And maybe let me just pick up on that. Is the rationale then, or the justification for limiting this kind of speech, the idea that minority groups should not be excluded from normal society by virtue of belonging to that minority group, whether you are Muslim or gay or whatever the case may be? Is that the rationale?
One of the rationales for free speech and for maximizing free speech is the idea of the marketplace of ideas. That goes back hundreds of years. In support of legislative limitations on speech, people have said that, well, the market is not a free and fair place. It depends on structural power relations, how much money you have to access certain broadcast media, print media, things like that. Some voices are marginalized, some voices are silenced. And sometimes, because, for example, if you're a numerical minority or a historically subjugated group, it's extraordinarily difficult to put your head above the parapet and to speak out. And also the other part of the theory for these limitations is that people shouldn't be expected to justify their own humanity, to explain that they are human beings in the first place, because the effect of the hate speech is to deny their very humanity. So it's, and not only minority groups, so in South Africa, for example, you have a majority of the country racially black, and there is rampant hate speech against black people in both, limited as well as wider broadcast settings. So it's really about protecting anybody or any group's dignity, as well as, at least this is how the Equality Act puts it, about building a more cohesive society and advancing reconciliation and the project of rehabilitating human dignity in a country where it was denied for so long.
Thanks, Ben. So maybe just to then simplify it, if I were to try and understand what would look like hate speech, would the criteria then be advocacy for hatred based on, one of the group characteristics or grounds of justification? Not justification, the grounds that are outlined in the Constitution. You mentioned them: gender, religion, ethnicity, forget the other one, and race, and which then advocates for harm on that particular group. Is that the test, essentially?
So it depends what we're trying to achieve. So if you want to put people in jail, then that would be the test, in my view. Is the Constitution says that you can impose whatever limitations you want on this kind of speech because it's not free speech at all. So if it constitutes incitement to cause harm on any of those four grounds, then it's not only aconstitutional, it's anti-constitutional speech and is not protected. So you could criminalize that, of course, subject to proportionality in the sense of a person's liberty, because it's a limitation on liberty, not only speech. But lesser forms of hate speech, less extreme hate speech, like the one in the Equality Act, the court found in Koilane, although the reasoning was unsatisfactory, was that was a justifiable limitation in order to protect the right to equality and dignity, that you can prohibit even more speech than that very high test for what is excluded from constitutional protection. You can also limit that, just like you limit defamatory speech and things like that.
Right, cool. We do have a question in the audience next to Paul. Paul, I hope you did not send the question surreptitiously.
No, it's just the aura weighing off.
Okay, and another question here.
Good evening, my name is Dumelo. I just wanted to find out, when does hate speech cross the line in terms of satire and humor? because oftentimes we do like to laugh at ourselves, but I just want to know, how do we then differentiate between what's artistic expression and when the line has been crossed into spaces of hate speech?
Thanks, Dumelo. Let's take another question, William.
Yeah, mine is about, yeah, William Bird. Hassan Logard is my name. Yeah, mine is about, you say the exclusion of the criteria of nationality, but South Africa has ratified a number of conventions, the prime one being the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, where the right to nationality is prime, if you like, the standard law. So, I don't, for example, I'm not a lawyer, pretend to be interested in law. So I would imagine it is acceptable in our law. So why is it that often no one has taken up the official attacks on Somalis or whoever as a hate? It's not because of the law, it's more because of power.
Thanks, Hassan.
Thanks,
Benj, artistic expression. I don't know if Hassan's was a question or more of a comment, but happy for you to tackle those.
Well, both very thought-provoking contributions. To Melo's question, when does it cross the line? For me, I mean, you won't find this in any judgment or any statute, but for me, it's an assessment of the conflict between the right to freedom of expression and the right to dignity and equality on the other hand. And we can speak in the abstract about proportionality of the balance. But for me, it's ultimately a human being has to make the decision, and the human being needs to abstract themselves as much as possible from their own race, sex, or whatever life experience they have, and look at it objectively. And to me, the test is this person punching up or punching down? So satire is punching up. You're tackling the powerful. You are tackling those who are trampling on other people's rights. But where you're punching down, so I've heard comedians, and fortunately nobody laughed. This was many years ago at Cool Runnings. Anybody ever used to go to the Comedy Underground at Cool Runnings? This comedian got up and started making jokes about people with albinism, and nobody laughed. He got ice thrown at him and he had to leave the stage. It's not a joke. It's hatred. It's harm. So where you draw a caricature or you write a song that is punching down on a group that is not oppressing anybody, or is not that a group as such can be oppressing people, but a group that needs or deserves to have its dignity respected, then you cross the line. That's where you cross the line. And Hassan's point about nationality, yeah, it's a political thing. When the Act was passed in 2000, they reserved the question of whether discrimination on the grounds of nationality and HIV status would be included. And they left them out at that stage and said, we'll revisit it in a few years. The reason is because they wanted to leave open the possibility that employers could discriminate on the grounds of nationality and HIV status. It's shocking looking back. But that was the reason. They revisited it several years later and put HIV status in so that you can't discriminate on the basis of HIV status under the Equality Act. But they've still left out nationality. So you have no remedy under the Equality Act in the Equality Court for xenophobic speech. If, for example, you murder someone for xenophobic reasons, or you burn their shop down, that will be the crime of murder or the crime of arson. A judge could take those aggravating circumstances into account. A hateful motive can be taken into account. And now under the new Hate Crimes Act, it must be taken into account. So it was always open to the courts to take that into account. They never really did so satisfactorily. Yeah.
So this is me at my next dinner party. I'll be saying, I love how Ben framed it, whether you're punching up, in answering to Melo's question, whether you're punching up or punching down. And I'll be saying, well, you know, I think the test is, are you punching up or are you punching down? I love that. By the way, check out Jonathan Shapiro's documentary. Don't know if it's still available. It's called Showerhead. And I think that really captures the essence of what Ben was saying about punching up and speaking truth to power. We do have a question. Is it a quick question? You've got the mic? No, it's not a question. Oh, okay. Cool. So we've got... Yeah, where's the hater raiders?
We are the hater raiders.
Oh, right. I mean the annihilators.
While we wait for them, I'll just add that the Showerhead documentary, I think it's still showing at Tuna Manuvo in Rosebank. Interestingly enough, it was not shown anywhere in KwaZulu-Natal for perhaps obvious reasons. But talking about punching up and punching down, it came up in the hearings of the Film and Publication Board appeal body, because initially it was given a rating of 16 language, nudity, prejudice, and sexual violence, and we appealed against that and got it reduced to 13 language and sexual violence. The language is purely Mondli Makanya's fault. He just can't control himself. But really, it's a magnificent film. You should go and see it.
And why is that documentary not on SABC platforms, for instance? No, like, I'm not being funny, but...
Yeah, that's above my pay grade. It's probably a licensing and money issue more than anything else, yeah.
Asra?
Well, if somebody wants to pay me, I'll see what I can do.
Oh, wow.
No, I really will.
Okay, thanks. We're just waiting for the other team. Have they left? Like, have they decided this is it?
They might be afraid.
Okay.
I don't know.
Cool.
No.
So while we wait, Sandy, how did you find this exercise?
It was very interesting. I especially found the second one quite difficult.
Okay.
But yeah, like there is the law perspective, but there's also the newsroom perspective.
Right.
From a news perspective,
sensationalism.
Neither of these scenarios would go down very well in a newsroom. But law-wise, it's quite interesting how the law works. So it's been quite an interesting discussion.
Cool. Well, let's find out how you rate the hate. So just a reminder, I'll go through scenario 1 again. DP sends a message on his neighborhood WhatsApp group. That WhatsApp group had about 250 members with a picture of the old South African flag from a history book and the caption, "Let's bring it back," followed by hashtag WP, an emoji of a white heart and an emoji of a skull and bones. Now we must rate the hate. So we'll start with the hater raiders. Was it the annihilators? I'm confused. Okay, so we'll start with your team, Asra. Off you go.
Okay, sure. So we had, I think the first one for us was a little bit easier to get to and to pinpoint. We looked specifically at the symbolism of the flag and the words, "Let's bring it back." And we agreed, all of us, that it amounted to some sort of incitement or advocacy for hatred based on race. We also then looked at some of, outside of, the Constitution and the Equality Act and whatever, at some of the very specific guidelines or policies that we as the media have to deal with, and came to the conclusion that it definitely amounted to hate speech in terms of the first community WhatsApp group.
Okay.
And we then looked at the second scenario and said that possibly if that sort of message was sent in a very small, closed, private group, that the reaction would be very, very different. So we didn't think that in this case it would amount to a hate speech. And we also looked at the whole idea of, would a reasonable person, in terms of our audience, for example, come to sort of a similar kind of understanding, seeing this kind of message. Okay. And our rating on that first one was a 7.
7.
Correct.
Out of 10.
Yes.
Cool. So 7 out of 10 in totality, or you're not separating?
In totality.
Totality.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you want me to go to the next one, or
No, let's do the first,
Sure.
and then we'll go to scenario 2.
do you want to add anything, Sani?
Actually, I think you covered it.
Sleep?
Maybe just to thank you for that explanation. I think it was really helpful. The private communications one was just based on case law, where our constitutional court has recently given guidance on whether hate speech, how that applies in the context of private communications that are of an intimate nature. It's quite a controversial position, and we don't necessarily agree with it, but we saw the two scenarios as quite distinct from one another. Just based on the first one, where the message is sent to a larger group of people and is quite public, but because of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's my only addition.
Thanks, Lee. I'm not cutting you off. I meant to keep it at 2 minutes per group. All right, so let's move across the ocean. Claire, who's going up? Oh, is it Khomoto? Well, you've got the mic.
So we approached this scenario in a similar way, kind of put together a bit of a rubric for ourselves to kind of figure it out. And we worked first, having broken down the stipulations or the definitions from the Equality Act. We started with intention, or the objective of what the statement is, and we found that with this particular one, we also zoomed in on the words "let's bring it back," as well as what the apartheid flag actually represents. So in terms of intention, we found that there was a clear intention to spread hate. And then the second part of our rubric, second requirement, is the prohibited ground, which also, according to the Equality Act, in this particular instance, race is prohibited ground. So we found it passed that test. And then whether it's harmful or incitement, or incites, or causes harm, or promotes or promulgates hatred. And again, we found on that ground, this does meet that. So we were left with the last one, which the jury's still out on, around whether or not this WhatsApp group is a public domain. And we know that this conversation, a widespread conversation about that, how public a WhatsApp group can be. We then decided to consider whether it is, the fact that it's a neighborhood WhatsApp group, as well as its accessibility, so who can enter it, is it open to everyone? And what type of space is that WhatsApp group, whether the space is one that encourages conversation around social issues, or if it's limited to, hey, there's a dog walking across the road. And we found, so it was tricky on that. But because we strongly felt that with the first three, there was clear, or those passed the test quite clearly. And with the fourth one, we know that there's currently new case law from someone who's sitting next to us. We then decided that this does constitute hate speech, and we gave it a 10.
Khomoto Modise, Eyewitness News. Right, so they gave it 10, and that's it. Yeah, the 2 minutes are up. Okay, cool. Now over to the audience. Just, look, we're not voting for a motion of no confidence against the public protector. Just raise your hands, please. If you felt Slee's team was clearer, or you could understand the rationale. Just by a show of hands. Did you prefer them? Not? Okay. If you felt Khomoto's team. Okay. Well, no, that's that. Not just yet. Not so quick. This is just part of. Oh, okay. Not so fast. Okay, cool. So we'll wrap up scenario 1. That's it. Look, the results will be announced right at the end after scenario 4, if we get there. Right, scenario 2.
Do we go?
Wait, hang on. Do you want me to repeat the scenario? That's Andrew Tate. Actually, I don't want to repeat his foul words. Happy for you to go, Astra.
I just want to lodge an objection first.
Yes.
we lodged our argument within the time limits. We did not go over. We did not create rubrics. We did not do all those fancy things.
Gosh, Asha, what in the MK is going on?
However, I would like to launch a counter argument and objection to that.
I knew there
two
was
of them spoke. It was only one person within 2 minutes.
William
That's why we won, Azra.
Okay, hold on.
That's
hold
why
on.
we won.
Ladies, okay, please. Maybe let's move on to scenario 2.
Okay,
Let's see how
scenario
you
two,
fare.
right.
Yes.
So we agreed that the words in general understanding context would be would have or come with a negative connotation.
Okay.
So that was the first part of it. But in terms of our looking at the scenario technically, and I think Slee would agree, from a legal perspective, was it inciting any kind of action? Was it advocating harm in
Nozintombi, can we
any
have one
way?
meeting?
We decided that possibly it was not from a legal perspective something that would incite or advocate specific harm.
Okay.
We did, however, discuss the fact that if we were to look at patterns, or if we could establish a pattern of behavior, then our argument might be different and we might come up with a different solution. However, even though we decided that from a technical perspective or from a legal perspective, this might not constitute hate speech, we thought that from a news perspective, the argument would be very, very different. And both Sandy and I agreed that it is not in the public interest in any way for us to decide to use this kind of speech. I don't know if you want to elaborate.
No, she must just tell us what the rating is, because the 2 minutes are up.
Oh, okay. So we rated this one a 5 out of 10.
5 out of 10. Thank you. Thanks very much indeed. Khomotso, your team's up.
So you're going to do this one, right?
We're sharing the load. That's how teamwork works. So using our rubric that Khomotso so graciously told us a little bit earlier,
The shade.
we decided that while it may not necessarily constitute hate speech directly, it is derogatory. It was publicized with the intention to be derogatory, not just only to people who are of a different sexual orientation, but also to people who are who are in a different political space to Andrew Tate himself. So when we go back to our rubric and we look at the issue about the intention is obviously to be harmful to people who are Democrats by using a derogatory sexual orientation slur to bring them down, pull them down, and drive a point of hatred or drive a point of negativity towards Democrats. Harmful and insightful, it's definitely had the intention to incite a derogatory feeling towards people who are Democrats by associating them with a derogatory slur for people who are, gay or lesbian. And whether it was made in the public domain, it was obviously made in the public domain. So that is obviously something that is public in terms of our rubrics. In terms of prohibited grounds, obviously, using sexual slurs is obviously derogatory. And then, in terms of how we're going to rate it, as I said earlier, we're going to rate it as a 5 to say it may not necessarily be hate speech, but it is definitely derogatory. And to also follow on from what Azra said, I think obviously with us in the broadcasting, we obviously wouldn't broadcast something like this, but how do you then treat the story when it now goes to court? Because what language do you use? You can't use verbatim what he said. Right. How then do we frame it in the newsroom to be able to reflect the story?
Cool.
Thank you.
So thank you, Miss Mia.
Yeah, sorry, just 2 seconds.
Half a second.
Yes. So I think what's important here, what it came down to for us, is that what's hurtful isn't necessarily hateful. And so while we thought that it was hurtful, we didn't think that it passed the test of it being hateful.
Thank you.
And that's why we're at the 5.
Thank you. Thanks very much indeed. So both teams went for a 5. Right, audience, now your turn. Shall we start with this team? The annihilators, the haters, haterators. So, hands up if you felt you understood or maybe liked what they had to say about scenario 2. Annihilators. Okay. Haterators. Hey. All right, well, I think there we are. Okay, please give them a round of applause. So, at this point, I'm going to give them scenarios 3 and 4, and then I'm going to chat to Ben some more. Is everybody still good? Are you still alive, or are you bored? I hope you're not, because, I mean, really. Okay, scenario 3. Where is the line between race baiting and hate speech now? Former head of a prominent accountability institution and current member of parliament, will call her AN, posted this on social media. I find myself deeply disappointed and disheartened. My ongoing struggles has consistently involved key figures, predominantly of Indian descent, who have positioned themselves as my persecutors. These individuals and their attitudes towards me underscore the challenges and biases I have faced in my quest for justice. They are un-African. They should go back where they came from. This is our land. They must leave. End quote. In response, a prominent union commented, "It is unacceptable for an MP to indulge herself in what amounts to hate speech against any section of the South African population, including comrades of Indian origin." AN responded as follows to the response. "My concerns arise from observing current trends and feeling unjustly targeted by certain narratives. It was never my intention to undermine anyone's integrity." And that's scenario 3. Now, before I read out scenario 4, can I just say this is really for fun purposes. We are not aligned to any side, and yeah, we're neutral on this. We're Switzerland. Right, scenario 4, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. Social media user WH posts the following. "I hope Palestine gets the support they need to end them so they don't take over." GL then responds in a comment, "If Israel wins the war, I am hopeful that you and your turban-wearing friends suffer a terrible fate, you dumb ass. What a filthy human you are." That's it, and that's scenario 4. Got it? Cool beans? All right, teams, good luck. Zing, 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 zing. Zing, 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 zing. I played The Amazing Race this weekend. I don't know if do you know The Amazing Race, that American reality show? I mean, I loved it so much. You know, you always find a mom and a daughter and you root for them and then they get eliminated. But Waterfall City tried to replicate a similar thing this Saturday, but it was so hot. I looked at the prizes, I was like, umbrellas? I'm sorry, I'm going to sit in the shade. So I just went to the prize giving. But yeah, it was still exciting. Cool beans, Ben. Maybe let me start here. I'm still working out, you know, whether social media has been a force for good or a force for destruction. What are your thoughts on this, particularly when it comes to hate speech and really live and robust engagement that we see on a daily?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't really see it in the sense of being a force for good or for evil. It's a mode of communication that, like every mode of communication before it, can be used for good or ill purposes. So Email, when it first came around, was a great way to keep people in touch, across borders, families who had moved apart or whatever. And was also used to spam people, and to send people threats and circulate hateful messaging and damaging material, racist material. It can put people in touch with each other for the most innocent purposes and the most malevolent purposes. So I think it's amplified and intensified a lot of things that were already there. So, as far as bigotry is concerned, homophobes could always gather in a place and vent their hatred and perhaps even instigate some kind of action or to act on that hatred. But with social media, I think the one unique thing that it has done is that, where people might previously have felt isolated, they can find a community of bigots. I'm thinking of the guy who perpetrated the mosque massacre in New Zealand a few years ago. He was someone who wasn't part of any particular neighborhood community of Islamophobes or neo-Nazis or whatever. But he was part of an online community of right-wing racists who, would share information about how to create explosives and things like that. So that is one unique feature. We didn't have that before. Right. So it has its immensely positive features. Just sharing of reels and memes that bring upliftment to people. It's great watching cats, jump in fear of cucumbers.
Right.
This kind of crazy thing you find
on the
internet. It's a thing.
TikTok.
But it has presented massive complications for dealing with speech and with hate speech.
Cool. Agreed. Remember, the lines are open. You're welcome to chime in. Hassan, do you have a question?
No, it's more, I think that what we're missing probably is pace. The rapidity and how at ease and easy it is to do. It's not so much, we could write letters of hate or cut from the newspaper and threaten people, but that's a lot of hard work. This is like so easy to do. And I think that's something to consider, really, the pace.
It's a very good point. I'll just answer that one quickly, and then we'll take the next one. The access to social media and the ability to be anonymous, is another feature that makes it quite dangerous. But access by children is another factor. Previously children wouldn't have had access to communication media. They could read the newspaper at home, but they wouldn't have the wherewithal to post nasty letters to people or things like that. Whereas now it's people who lack maturity and don't always appreciate the consequences of what they're saying can engage in the most abhorrent behavior. So that is another factor as well.
Paul?
Okay, yeah. I'm going to try to avoid making it higher grade.
No higher grade questions, Paul. No higher grade. I'm going to call the police.
Historically, the broadcasting of hate speech has been treated as a principal concern, as opposed to just what people say privately and so on. We look at Rwanda. It's when you've got a radio station and the like. Certain social media platforms have attained the reach of broadcast. In your earlier comment concerning children, it's one thing for people to, on a news group, in the old NNTP days, on the internet, you connected there. People found these little corners of hatred. People found these little bars where they, would blabber off and so on. And I'm not suggesting that these Ulster bars where some of the violence was hatched up in Ireland are not a problem. But I'm saying it's a distinct problem from a broadcast context. Twitter, in my view, and Facebook, and unfortunately even WhatsApp in terms of groups, has evolved to a point in which I'm not sure that that idea that they're not broadcasters applies anymore. I'm not entirely sure that we can still treat them as having a safe harbor, you know, and take it down to the user. Yeah.
Ben, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so I agree completely. I don't think that they can be treated as having any kind of safe harbor or being regarded as innocent disseminators of things that other people say. You know, they provide a platform, and also they facilitate anonymity, which shields people from accountability for what they say, which emboldens hate speech and blackmail and other things. It is, I think, more a question of spectrum. You know, how much reach does a particular platform offer, rather than, you know, is it covered or isn't it covered? You might look at, you know, saying that all speech is in principle of some kind of legal relevance, but the extent of the reach is, you know, intensifies the legal focus or consequences.
We'll speak to William about that. I mean, we put it to the platforms themselves at some point that you guys are like the biggest editors of content, and they're like, no, we're not. Much like Uber, who keeps on saying, no, we're not in the transport business, we're a tech company. And you'll find out when you have an accident in an Uber and they just give you a refund. And they're just like, okay, well, that's it. And you're like, but what about my medical expenses? Anyway, we do have a question at the back.
Hi, my name is Tembelani Mazibugo. My question is actually for you. Can you explain to me why your comment that you made was not hate speech when you said that there's a period documentary is not being aired in KwaZulu-Natal for obvious reasons? Obviously, the undertone is that people from KwaZulu-Natal lack critical thinking. They are perhaps monsters, naturally violent. Can you explain to me why that comment isn't hate speech? Because, I mean, someone can make a joke and say, here's the apartheid. I'm not saying it was, I'm just asking, explain to me why it does not constitute as hate speech.
We went through the definition of hate speech. I mean, so you need 3 key elements, okay? The first being an advocacy for hatred. Second, the grounds that are listed in the Constitution based on race, gender, ethnicity, and religion. Okay, so you've got group characteristics that are required. And then you need the third element being, help me out, Ben, which is that harm that needs to be propagated. That cannot constitute hate speech at all. It literally just doesn't meet the test, unless Ben thinks otherwise.
No, I see where the question is coming from. You know, obviously an interpretation of what is said, and I mean the reason why the cinemas refused to air the documentary was because there had been threats from MK to burn theatres down. So it's more a comment about a political organization rather than, you know, people from a particular region. But I see where the interpretation comes from, and that there is the suggestion that there could be violent repercussions if the film was aired there. But you know, I'd say that given that threats were made, that it's a fair comment in the circumstances. But it, you know, language and comments are very easily interpreted in different ways. Yeah,
sorry, we had a question here next to Hassan first.
Thank you. Name is Marta Garrick. And as we're talking online and social media, I'm thinking of all friends back at home who are women, the other home, women journalists who've moved themselves away from platforms because of the constant hate speech and attacks and things like, I know where you live and I'll rape you, for whatever their reporting has been, feminist or not. And I listened curiously when the 2 other cases were coming, because I wondered whether any of them was going to be on hate speech on issues of misogynist, you know, right. And coincidentally, I'm revisiting now Professor Kola books on rape, and then the Female Fear Factory. So we spoke about about the core of what makes a person human, you know, or dignity. Sorry, I get too nervous.
Don't be nervous.
Especially when I have to go in English in front of people. But it was reminding me of Professor McKinnon's years ago when she was representing Bosnian rape victims and how she asked the question, are women human? You know, why are we not seeing rape as a war crime and considering it as a human rights in the human rights courts, you know? So my question after all of this is boiling in my head, and you spoke also about what strikes fear in our entire community, and again, the perpetuation of these kinds of comments on social media and targeting of women strikes fear when we constantly, you know, and the book talks about, and I wasn't living here at the time, you know, about the whole coverage of the rape trial, you know, where Zuma was sitting on the. So my question is, I guess, whether in a society where this kind of hate speech in a patriarchal society is so normalized, do we see a lot of these cases brought forward, or is just we don't see them anymore because it's part of ingrained, and yet they are part of the fabric of fear that we move and we survive around?
Thank you, Magda. I'll give Ben a chance to answer that question. We've got a hand next to Gary in the blue shirt and right at the back as well.
Factual statements is an issue to me. Whether it may be a nasty fact, like I believe there was a court which decided that the statement that Jacob Zuma was a thief was a perfectly acceptable statement, I believe. And I didn't follow it in detail. It's just something I picked up. And then there are also opinions which are legitimately expressible in conflictual situations, and we are highly conflictual in this country. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Your name, sir?
Oh, my name is Siegfried Hannig.
Thank you. Thank you, Zig. The blue shirt.
Hi there. My name is Blue Shirt. No, I'm Billy. So, yeah, I think this has become front and center because social media has given everyone a megaphone. And, you know, you can find someone who says something unintentionally, maybe they've got 2 followers, but suddenly because someone retweets it, it becomes an explosion, like a wildfire, and I think that could be problematic. My question is, and it's a difficult question to answer, I think, how does intention play into this? Because surely intention plays a big part of if something is hate speech, and how do you determine the intent of something that was said that might be offensive?
As far as I know, thanks, Billy, and I'll let Ben chime in on this. As far as I know, the subjective intention of the speaker is irrelevant. It's a bit of an objective test. But Ben, maybe let's start with Magda's question about the prevalence and the entrenchment of this in society.
Yes, no, Marta, thank you very much for asking that question and putting it so in such moving terms. It's a major disappointment of mine that we don't have more hate speech cases concerning misogyny. The only major case that we've had was during the Zuma rape trial. Julius Malema gave a speech where he said, you know, that woman wasn't raped because she asked for taxi money, she stayed the night, and she took food from the fridge. She stayed for breakfast. And rape victims don't do that. He was taken to the Equality Court by Sonke Gender Justice Network, and the court found very correctly and progressively that this was hate speech against women by propagating rape myths and harmful stereotypes about women and rape victims. You know, that was many years ago, and under the way that the Kwelane judgment by the Constitutional Court narrowed the prohibition on hate speech, I don't know if that case could have been decided the same way today, which I think is regrettable. But for me, and I said this at last year's Rate the Hate discussion, that for me the next frontier, you know, we've had a lot of important strides on hate speech against on the basis of race, and a degree of hate speech on the basis of religion and sexual orientation, but not nearly enough on the basis of sex and gender. And a lot more needs to be done. There have been some opportunities missed. There was some litigation that wasn't done in the correct fashion and didn't get the right result. But yeah, more needs to be done.
And Billy's question about subjective intention, did I get it right, Ben?
So there was Zig's comment about statements of fact and comments. Yeah, generally a statement of fact has a much higher degree of scrutiny. So you need to be able to justify it. You need to be able to prove that it's true. A comment is, there's a lot more license, a lot more latitude, but the more it tends to be a factual assertion or to be authoritative about what it's saying, the more you need to be able to prove the truth of what you're saying or a connection to the truth when it comes to a comment. And Billy's question about intention, yeah, currently under the test in the Equality Act, the test is objective. Even though the word intention appears, the Constitutional Court has fudged it and said, well, we'll just pretend it doesn't say intention and say it's an objective test. Where intention would come into play is in remedy. If it's shown that a person had the intention to propagate hatred, that would aggravate the community service or the fine or the damages. If he could show that he didn't intend it in that way, then that would mitigate the remedy. He would then have lesser community service and the like. So it is relevant.
Thank you. Thanks so much for all the comments and the questions and the engagement. It's really, really encouraging. But we've got our teams back. And they're looking, I don't know, despondent, stressed out. Okay, we're going to start with the annihilators this time. Khomotso, you've got the mic. And 2 minutes.
Hello. Okay, cool. So these were harder, I should say. They were tougher. But again, we used our rubric. And with the first one, so it was very clear that in terms of it being public, it is said in the public. It was tweeted on social media, on X. And so that passes that part of the test. And then in terms of prohibited ground, as stipulated by the Equality Act, it was clear that this is it's to race, right? So it's Indian people. So that was very clear. And in terms of intention, we said that it doesn't matter that she at some point said that she didn't intend for it to be, or for her to be hateful. What we found, though, was that it was how a reasonable person would interpret it. And we found that a reasonable person would think of it as being hateful, especially in the current environment where we are in such a xenophobically charged society. So we agreed that in terms of that, that was, it passes the test for hate. As a result, we rated it 8. And I think in terms of the call to action, we said that there was a clear, incitement, that's what I wanted to say, incitement. We were using incitement in the same way we thought about it as a call to action. And this clearly showed a call to action where she says they should go back to where they come from,
right.
i.e. they're calling for them to return. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Khomotso. We will move across. Slee, or is it? Okay, well.
Okay, so I think we used similar kinds of dynamics, but the one thing that we thought was very important was that the statement was made by a public figure and that there should be a greater degree of responsibility from a public figure. We did not think that the first part of the statement, the referral to people of Indian descent, whatever, was advocating any particular harm to any specific group of people. It was mentioning them, but we didn't think that it was advocating or inciting any particular harm. We also took note of the factor of nationality not being a specific grounds for hate speech. We considered the idea of xenophobia as well and decided that it was not an issue of xenophobia at all. And the other issue we considered was how can we judge intention retrospectively? We did, however, come to the conclusion that The second part of the statement, the inciting, asking people to leave, etc., definitely was inciting, was harmful. It was a call to action. And like I said at the beginning, deserved even higher importance because of the person's role as a public figure, and we rated it an 8 as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, there's a pattern here. Scenario 2, both teams went 5, and now scenario 3, both teams are going 8. Well, okay, I'll note that for the judge. Okay, audience, over to you. So, which team was clearer? Which team did you believe the most? Is it Khomotso's team? Annihilators. Is it the Annihilators? Okay, it looks like the Haterators. Oh dear. Wait, hang on, let's do that again. This is why Wendy Williams says clap.
I don't think Ben had enough time to count. He's like, yeah.
Okay. Okay, wait. Clap if you think it's the Annihilators. Okay. Clap if you think it's the Haterators. Oh gosh, thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, let's move on to scenario 4 so we can call it. Right, scenario 4. Who wants to go first? Which team?
We'll continue the pattern.
Aha, there you go. That's the spirit.
Okay. So this actually sparked a bit of debate between us, and we are ultimately split in the end. However, one point we'd like to make before we get to that is there has been some jurisprudence, so case law, that indicates that even though grounds such as nationality are not specifically listed in the Equality Act, they are analogous in that they are similarly attached to that person's sense of being. And for that reason, we think that the ground of nationality does meet the criteria in terms of our rubric. I'll now hand over to my colleague.
Thank you. We're going to try and fit this within 2 minutes, but if you could bear with us. So looking at our rubric again, we look at the issue of whether the sentiments or whether the statements were made in a public domain. It was a tour. They were trolling each other on social media. So that was obviously made in the public domain. It was one person saying something and somebody responding back to it on a public forum. In terms of the first statement, this is how we looked at it. We looked at it, the statements in their own individual capacity. So in terms of the first statement, we felt that the statement was anti-Semitic because it came across as being not necessarily hateful, but it was mean. It was actually a mean-spirited thing to say, but it was not necessarily a call to action. It wasn't a call to incite action. It was just something that's mean. In terms of intention, it was not necessarily something that was, it was not a statement that was directed at a person. It was a statement made by the social media user to show support towards Palestine. Even though it was written in a mean-spirited way, it was not necessarily hateful. Now, this is where it gets slightly tricky in terms of where our differing positions are. In terms of the second statement. Now, we felt that the first part of the statement shows a clear intention to incite violence against Palestinians. Because this social media user is calling for turban-wearing people to suffer a terrible fate. Turban-wearing people are people who are typically Palestinian, and as our lawyer spoke so nicely, the word jurisprudence talks about how, you know, being mean to people against their nationality is kind of hateful. So that we feel was insightful. So quickly before you cut me off.
Your score.
No, I think it's fine. Yeah, we were split on whether, again, the words call to action. I felt that as much as the statement was hurtful, he's not calling for anything to happen. to Palestinian people. And so on that ground, I'm not sure it's incitement. And we rated it a 6.
6. Thank you. Thanks very much, Annihilators.
Sorry, just so the 2 statements in there, which one is 6?
No. So what in total, we said the entire scenario. But yeah, so we tried to, so the first one we don't think is hate speech. We don't think it constitutes hate speech. It's mean. The second one, there are grounds for it to be hate speech. It's just at the incitement point in particular where we differ.
Okay. Okay, can we move on, Judge Winks? Or no, as in, have you gotten all the clarity, or do you have further questions? Okay, cool. Hater Raiders.
Okay, so we spoke about the fact that despite this interaction being on a public platform, that it was essentially an interaction between 2 individuals, and therefore we were a little bit uncertain about whether it would amount to hate speech at the beginning. The first part of the statement we thought was essentially an individual opinion, somebody stating, what they believed, and we didn't see that there was any specific incitement or call to action in any way. We also, when we went to the second part, or to the reaction, while there was a specific group of people identified, we were not certain that, first of all, it wasn't maybe specific enough. Many groups of people wear turbans, for example. The consequences of that, of course, could mean that it could be harmful to people who were not meant, to be kind of described in this statement. We did think that the response, or the response, the second part of this scenario, was in some way inciting or advocating some sort of harm, the sort of terrible fate kind of statement, but it wasn't also very specific. And then to wrap it up, to choose a phrase from our learned colleagues, we thought that it was hurtful, not hateful, and we rated it overall a 5.
A 5. Half a
5
second.
seconds. 5 seconds. Sorry. Okay, half a second. So the first statement, a difficulty we had while we were working through it, is that the end-them part seems very subjective and very unclear, and we weren't sure how the reasonable person would interpret that, just given the context of the situation. End-them could mean we're calling for an end to sort of a politically illegitimate system in Israel, or we're calling for violence. So just that sort of interpretive difference that could be had by multiple people was something we discussed.
Cool. Thank you. Please give them a round of applause. So your job for the night is done. Now you wait. Okay, let's move across to the audience for voting purposes. We're going to do the clapping system. So clap if you... I don't know if people watch the Wendy Williams show, but that's what she does, or she did then. She'd be like, clap if you watch the show. Okay, anyway, so clap if you like the Annihilators. Okay. Clap if you prefer the Hater Raiders. Sounds pretty even. Yeah, it sounds pretty even. Okay, so I'm going to put asterisks next to...
Does the judge have hearing?
Yes. Okay, cool. So now, I don't know do people need a 2-minute break, William, or not? Because I just need to deliberate with our judge to tally up the scores. They won't come back. Oh, should we just wrap up and then? Oh, really? Okay, so just talk amongst yourselves. And then yeah. Okay, William.
I will save time for what I was going to do at the end, which is to give a preview of tomorrow. So tomorrow is our third and final day of the Media Freedom Festival. We start in the morning with a fabulous panel organized by our friends, the GCIS, and that's looking at 30 years of democracy and 30 years of media, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there's lots of all three of those things. In the afternoon, we have our third and final intimate session, and that's also really, really cool because we're looking at a model for dealing with mis and disinformation, a policy solution. It's an online integrity ombud. So that's for the policy people who get all excited about policy issues and disinformation. And in the evening, our final session for the Media Freedom Festival is looking at media sustainability and media viability. So that's one you'll definitely want to be here for because you'll need a drink as you discuss and learn just how terrible things are in our media sector. So that's our day tomorrow. Please do join us. The food is fabulous. Those of you that have stayed and had the food, the lunch is marvelous and the dinner is even better, and there will be alcohol again. Right, and that's... Okay, I'll tell you this joke. Do you know why a group of Gen Zs always walk in odd numbers, like 3, 5, or 7 of them? Because they can't even.
Gosh, thank you, William. Oh, really? Oh, shame. They're only laughing because you're feeding everybody. Because everybody's being polite. Okay, so but thanks for that ad. That's given us time to deliberate. And our system is a lot more rigorous. Let me not even go there. Yeah, let me hand over to our judge, Winks, to give us, the results.
Oh, what am I supposed to do?
Well, you're just going
to... Okay. To both teams, I should just start by saying that the title of my critique of the Kwelane judgment was Hate Hurts. So you're already both on the wrong footing with me. So, yeah, just because I think the distinction between hurtful and hateful is a bit more fluid than we sometimes think. Something I'll say just about in general, and then I'll address each particular one. This element of publicity and what should be public. So as Slee had said earlier, the Constitutional Court in Kwelane said that in order to be hate speech, the speech needs to be public. It was a very careless comment in the context of the judgment because Judge Majid didn't bother to explain what he meant by public and private. In our constitutional law, the distinction between public and private is not a binary black and white thing. It's a spectrum. It's a question of what Judge Sachs in the mystery judgment called concentric circles, that the closer it gets to the inner sanctum of your being, your sex life, your innermost thoughts, your married life, your relationship with your priest, that's your inner sanctum. But the further we get from the inner sanctum, the more you move into social interaction, professional interaction, business interaction, then the scope of privacy shrinks accordingly. So there isn't really a binary between what's public and private. So let's start with scenario 1 then. Another general comment I'll make just before I dive into that one is that incitement or call to action is not necessarily required for hate speech to be present, at least under the Equality Act. So the elements are that it must demonstrate a clear intention or reasonably demonstrate a clear intention to be harmful or to incite harm is the first leg, and then to promote or propagate hatred. So to be harmful or to incite harm is something to look into slightly deeper. The Constitutional Court has found that speech can be harmful in 3 ways. So without even inciting anything, it can be harmful in 3 ways. 1, it can encourage members of the in-group, the speaker's in-group, to shun, degrade, discriminate against members of the out-group, or the target group, sometimes people say. The other is that the members of the out-group can hear that speech and feel degraded and have their self-worth demeaned. It can even make them retreat from social life. So that's the second form of harm. And the third form of harm is the harm it does to social cohesion, nation building, reconciliation, and the like. So there's that harm among the in-group, harm to the out-group, and harm to society as a whole. So there doesn't need to be a call to action. In judgment from the Rwandan Criminal Tribunal from the Civil War, Justice Pillay explained that sometimes the speech is the harm. You know, it's the speech inflicts the harm. It's not simply calling on people to cause some consequent harm. The speech itself can be the harm. So calling people cockroaches, you don't have to say, let's exterminate the cockroaches. You can just call them cockroaches, and that pours the petrol that eventually someone strikes a match and sets the place ablaze. So that's why in South Africa the most common hate speech cases we have is the use of the K word. There doesn't have to be any incitement or call to action, but the mere use of the word against another person or against nobody in particular, but in a context like, for example, not the K word, but calling black people monkeys and baboons like Penny Sparrow did, is not a call to action in any way, but is still hate speech. The same with Vicky Momberg, as Khomotso will remember, that she didn't call anyone to do anything, but was still racially abusing a person in a manner that amounted to hate speech. So if we look at scenario one, it is quite a tricky one. Now, a neighborhood WhatsApp group obviously is a platform where there ought to be at least people of different races, different political persuasions. You don't necessarily know that you're speaking to an audience that shares your views, but you are sending a message of white supremacy, and the courts have held that displaying the old flag outside of a museum or a cathartic artwork or a textbook or a newspaper article or whatever is hate speech. It is an endorsement of white supremacy if it is gratuitous. So sharing that in such a context is inviting other white people to share in white supremacy, to feel safe that there is a repository and a place for their white supremacy, and or it is to degrade the black people on the group. It is to make them know that they are unwelcome, and that at least someone in their neighborhood wishes that they were second, third, fourth class citizens once again. So the let's bring it back, it's not necessarily going to be taken literally in the sense that this is a politician who's actually mobilizing a force. So it might not even be considered to be incitement of some kind, because, how are neighborhood members going to bring apartheid back? But the message is one that, you can feel safe being a racist in this neighborhood, and you cannot feel safe being black in this neighborhood. So I would have rated this one an 8, because it has a fairly limited publication. It's not on social media or the like. The extent of the publication is a factor that has to be taken into account. Also, the prominence and the following of the speaker is another factor that gets taken into account when you're aggravating or mitigating hate speech. So in this case, I felt it would have been an 8, because a more prominent speaker on a more public platform would have edged it a bit higher, and perhaps, but it is violent speech for what it is. So I put it at an 8, which is closer to Team Hater Raters with 7, and Team Annihilators had 10. I
bang in the middle.
Purely because it's closer to 7, I give scenario 1 to the Hater Raters. So if you just keep score, what we have so far is the audience had given Hater Raters 3 and the Annihilators 2. So at the moment we've got Annihilators on 2 and hate raiders on 4. So you've got some catching up to do. Then attacks. Yes.
No, the first one, we won the first one. It was the second one that the audience gave me.
Yes, no. I'm counting all of the audience votes. Yeah, so that's the audience tally. I'm going to ask Khutazo to keep track of it and let us know where we are.
Oh my God. Okay. Would you ask a blind man to show you the way to town? Okay.
Okay. So scenario 2. You both said 5. I would have put it a bit higher. I would have put it at a 7. Aggravating factors are that this is a social media personality, so this is someone who has a strong following. I like the suggestion that, you know, if it was part of a pattern, you would have considered it as being a bit more serious. I don't think you can say it's not hate speech, but it is derogatory. I think it is hate speech if you use the rubric of the act. It demonstrates the intention to, on the basis of prohibited grounds, being sexual orientation, to be harmful. It's clearly designed to demean queer people. It's also promotes and propagates hatred against them. The target is ostensibly Democrats, but in firing his weapon at Democrats, he's deliberately firing it through a protected group. He's trampling over the rights of a protected group to get to his political target. So I thought it deserved a 7 because there's the mitigation is that there's no particular you know, on reflection, I'd probably give it an 8 actually, because the word itself carries so much violence with it over decades and decades of that being used when gay people were lynched and set alight. It's I think at least an 8. Both of you gave it a 5. I thought the explanation from haterators was a little bit more persuasive though. It was very close, but that just edges them to, I think, 5 and 2.
Is your rubric working?
Yes, no, but the other ones have bonus points in them, so it can... Okay. Where is the line between race baiting and hate speech?
That's scenario 3.
Scenario 3, yeah. This I would give a 9. Both teams gave it an 8. The reason I give it a 9 is because it's based on race. You know, South Africans in particular of Indian race. It is accompanied by speech that impugns their sense of national belonging. So while a lot of hate speech, you know, your 10 out of 10 kind of hate speech is the cockroach type of hate speech that actually says you are not a human being. The K word is essentially a word that says you're not a human being. The other way you can impugn a person's human dignity is not going as far as saying they're not a human being, but by saying they don't belong. Let's get rid of them. They don't belong here. They are not South African. Go back to where you came from, all of that kind of thing. There's a famous, well, not famous enough, but there's a hate speech case about social media attacks on Chinese South Africans, which speaks very much to this issue, where you impugn, in that case, some comments said they weren't human, others said they don't belong here. So you're in that region where you're telling people they don't belong when, you know, for generations, nobody has said this to me, whereas my parents are immigrants, and Indian South Africans have been here much longer than me. Yeah, I would have rated that a 9, particularly because of the comments at the end, they must leave, and the public profile, the fact that it's a member of parliament, the fact that it's on a public platform, and the lack of remorse is another aggravating factor. In this case, I was more persuaded, so both teams gave it an 8, I was more persuaded by the annihilators.
Okay.
So we now have 5-4. Is that right?
Yeah, maybe best to get a draw.
Yeah.
Well, no, there's going to be a bonus point, so it will get tipped one way or another if it's not a landslide this way. Okay, scenario 4, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. So the first comment, I hope Palestine gets the support they need to end them so they don't take over. So it has to be based on prohibited grounds, the comment. And this was one of the critical issues in the Masuku case, where a trade unionist had made various statements about Zionists and called for violence against Zionists. And the question in the Constitutional Court was whether the word Zionist is a code word for Jew. And the court found that it's not on its own. There can be contextual factors which push it over the edge that it is code. And in that case found that 3 out of the 4 comments were not based on religion or ethnicity, and 1 of them was. So it's very context specific. In this case, I don't think there's enough to tell us that them is an ethnic or religious group.
Right.
I think them could be the IDF, it could be the Israeli government, it could be Zionists. It doesn't necessarily refer to an ethnic group. So I agree with both teams that the first statement wouldn't qualify as hate speech under the Equality Act, unless there were contextual factors like a pattern of messaging from the same person, or maybe this was posted on a group that's about the Jewish New Year or something. Then those contextual factors would make it coded language for Jew. Now, turban-wearing friends, it's clearly, it's based on ethnicity. It's only people of Asian race, typically, or North African or Arab race that would be wearing turbans. It is a white supremacist term that's used a lot. I hope you suffer a terrible fate. I don't think there's any incitement here, so to speak, but as I say, incitement's not required. It's enough that you're causing harm. I take the point that it's essentially a fight between 2 people, but it is playing out publicly, and it does tell some people, also young people, that it's okay to say these things online if it's tolerated, if it's left up. It tells those bigots out there that they have an ally here, and it invites them to pile on as well. For that reason, I would have probably put it also as a 6. Haterators gave it a 5, Annihilators gave it a 6. So I would say that makes it 5-5. But I do have, I can't, there have to be winners and losers sometimes.
We're all winners.
It's very tough. I think both teams did exceptionally well at unpacking the harm that lies in speech. The interpretation of words is a very difficult exercise. And judges have difficulty with it. I wrote 30,000 words explaining why the court got it wrong in Koilane, and some things they got right. People will never agree on these results. But I think that the reasons and the setting out of a kind of a consistent theory of hate speech, I found slightly more on the side of the annihilators, but it was very close. I think really the audience will agree, really excellent analyses and excellent explanations of the difficulties presented by these scenarios. So well done to all of you.
Yay! Give him a warm round of applause. You guys did. Oh, wow. Goodness. Oh my gosh. Well, I was supposed to get reactions from the team, but you've just gotten the reactions. But thanks, everybody. That concludes this game. I think what's quite clear is that as noisy as some of this can get, it's better to just go to base principles, just do the legal tests before you jump on a bandwagon and start running with whether something is hate speech or not. And remember, context is everything. Please give everybody on the stage a round of applause. Well, that's our story. I believe William might have a word or two and a bag or two.
Giving out bribes.
To who?
Tokens of thanks, not to you.
Okay.
So there's food Food and drink, I think.
Yep.
Please join us, have a chat. Don't exercise any hate speech. Oh, Marta, the reason there wasn't was because we were just trying to change it up. Last year we had some particularly brutal misogyny hate speech examples. Next year we'll bring one back because they're kind of everywhere. And as you point out, it's on a daily basis. We had a fascinating discussion today, in fact, and if you go back and look at some of the posts on social media with journalists, and they're two women journalists, Conita Hunter and Heidi Jokos, talking about their lived experience and that they face a triple trauma every day of seeing and getting to a scene first and smelling someone's flesh burning, then going back to the office and them saying, you know, grow a pair, and then getting on social media and being trolled and humiliated and being horrid. So it's there all the time. But that's not a nice note to end things on. This was a fabulous event, and I think we can give them one last round of applause. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Well done. Nosy, are you happy? Okay, please don't disappear. We'd like your photographs, please. Oh, thank you. I get the black one. I'm wearing black. Oh, Tandi. Yeah, I'm gonna put this. Wait, no, put it on the podium. Oh, right. Oh, thank you. Thanks very much. You're the content queen.